Back now, today is World Environment Day. The United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP SA, in partnership with the Wildlife and Environment Society of South Africa, WESSA, will host a series of activities in commemoration of World Environment Day 2020 under the theme Biodiversity #4Nature. Now, of course, there have been many reports that the environment has fared much better under COVID-19 lockdowns worldwide. But let's discuss this with Cecilia Njenga, who's the head of the UN Environment Office in South Africa. Cecilia, thanks so much for speaking to us and welcome to Morning Live. All right, Cecilia, I'm not sure if you can hear me. I can't hear you at the moment, so just trying to see if we can hear each other. If you can hear me, Cecilia, then I just want us to talk a little bit more about this year's theme, Biodiversity #4Nature, and why the UN has chosen this and what does it mean?
Good morning, Sakina. Yes, the United Nations has dedicated the 5th of June of every year since 1982 really to commemorate and dedicate this day because precisely of the interconnected nature of all the life on the planet. And therefore, this year, we have dedicated it to the theme, as you said, #4Nature. It is time for nature, basically to commemorate and also to dedicate this time to understanding how human beings connect with nature and how we derive our sustenance and our livelihoods from nature, and therefore the importance for us to protect Mother Nature.
Now, we've seen various social media posts and reports that the environment is faring so much better under the worldwide lockdown. And dolphins, swans, we've seen so many animals returning to what would have been a natural habitat previously where they disappeared. We saw India's rivers becoming drinkable again, the water in them. Africa and many of the illegal oil fields and other industries ceasing to operate, Cecilia. Has this done as well for the environment as is being reported?
Sakina, COVID-19 could be seen as a silver lining in the short term. Indeed, we have seen, new species around my home. I've seen birds that I haven't seen before. It's indeed true that there's been clear air. We have seen a reflection of the air pollution that floats in many cities across the world, particularly the metro cities, clearing. And in Kenya, where I come from, there were visuals of people being able to see Mount Kilimanjaro or Mount Kenya from Nairobi, etc. And to hear from Pretoria, where I live, indeed, even the noise pollution has gone down as people stay home and stay away, from protecting themselves from COVID-19. So indeed, there has been some remarkable, visuals in terms of air pollution, in terms of water pollution, and we've seen more clarity and more resources regenerating themselves. But indeed, what we know is that it would take about 12 months or a year in order for us to see this kind of spectacular change taking place consistently. And therefore, a 2-month lockdown is really not enough to indicate to us that the carbon dioxide emissions, that the greenhouse gas emissions have indeed gone to a level that we aspire and that we have dedicated ourselves to in terms of dealing with issues of climate change and global change. And therefore, we are advocating that as countries put in place their economic stimulus packages, that indeed for us to see this trend continuing and for us to have the benefits of good air, good water, nutritious food, that indeed they integrate green recovery packages within that. And for instance, what I'm saying, public transport, for instance, can we be able to transition to much more cleaner fuel, for instance? Use electric buses instead of using buses that are fueled by fossil fuel, for instance. Are we able to increase the number of trees we are planting? Very small actions that we can take in our homes, in our schools, in our communities, etc. And therefore, there are some actions that we can precisely take over a period of time in order for us to start reaping the benefits of a better planet that we really deserve to live in.
And of course, we live in Africa, so particularly concerned about all this and the effects on our continent, Cecilia. And seeing that COVID-19 is a virus that mutated from an animal to a human, the process called zoonosis, of course, there, and seeing that many people living on the continent currently actually do live in close proximity to animals, there may be new zoonotic viruses on the continent, perhaps from wet markets similar to that in Wuhan city. Is the UN aware of any such dangers that are currently being posed on the African continent?
Indeed, most diseases and infectious diseases are actually spread through zoonosis. That is from animals to human beings. And increasingly, we are seeing that at least 75% of the new infections, new diseases that are coming are really through zoonosis. What we know as UNEP is that humanity's expansion on the terrestrial Earth surface has today taken over almost 75% of this Earth surface, squeezing wildlife and nature into an ever smaller corner of the planet. We are basically taking over the land that is supposed to be for nature, for our wetlands, land that is supposed to be populated by forests that give us better air, land that is supposed to be for our wildlife, our elephants, our lions, etc. And therefore, by us encroaching and further encroaching through urbanization, through population growth, etc., into these areas, and as we try also to extract minerals and other resources from the land, we are further endangering ourselves. And therefore, this World Environment Day is precisely to raise awareness about the need for us to keep the wild and to leave the wild for the wild. And let us occupy that space that has been provisioned for us and in harmony live with nature. And that's why for us, hashtag for nature and seeking that we live and in harmony with nature is really the buzzword and the clarion call that we have today.
Just a final question, Cecilia, and you spoke earlier about how clear the air is and how far we can see these days. Air pollution, of course, seemed to have drastically dropped due to, amongst others, not just the factories, but the airline industry basically coming to a halt. Now, we can breathe again, but has the UN done any research into pollution activities during COVID-19?
Indeed, we continue to measure, we continue to take, assess how our air quality is doing. And as I mentioned before, this is temporal. And I think for us to make it reality, we are saying that Africa, particularly African countries, do have an opportunity to leapfrog technologically through, for instance, transitioning to more use of renewable energy. You have talked about the airline industry. We are all using Zoom now. I did not have to travel into your studio today to be able to do this. So let's harness the usefulness of technology in terms of reducing our carbon footprint. Let us move to green investments, such as I mentioned, public transport. Let's transform that. Let's work more from home. Let's find avenues under which we can reduce the carbon dioxide and the greenhouse gas emissions. And let's have clean air to ensure that our children, that particularly women that are expectant, we do not expose them into air that can harmfully destroy their mental capacity as children or the ability for the children to grow into a better future. We have that responsibility as the older generation in terms of ensuring that the policies, the programs we put in place are truly green in nature. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Cecilia Njenga, head of the UN Environment Office in South Africa. The United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP SA, in partnership with WESSA, which is the Wildlife and Environment Society of South Africa, will host a series of activities in commemoration of World Environment Day 2020 under the theme Biodiversity #4Nature. Let's take a break.